With the WINN FM News, I am Kevin Brown.
And I am Yolana Weeks.
Our top stories. Nevis Premier advocates for trade diversification amidst Trump-era tariffs. St. Kitts Nevis ministers address historic trade alliance with Nigeria. St. Kitts Nevis Prime Minister addresses U.S. visa restriction concerns. Guyana's government studying 38% U.S. tariffs on Guyanese products. Grenada efforts in mitigating against tariffs' impacts. Internationally, South Africa's farmers hit hard by U.S. tariffs under Trump. Now, the details. Premier of Nevis, the Honourable Mark Brantley, addressed the growing need for trade diversification in St. Kitts and Nevis during a press conference held on March 31, 2025. The Premier highlighted the impact of the Trump administration's America First agenda, particularly the implementation of tariffs on countries that have historically been key import partners for the region. On April 2, 2025, U.S. President Donald Trump unveiled a swath of new tariffs, some of which affect the Caribbean region. The Federation and other territories have been hit with a 10% tariff, Guyana a 38% tariff. St. Kitts and Nevis also in a trade deficit of over $750 million with the U.S. against the surplus of other countries targeted by the tariffs. Brantley emphasized the importance of exploring new trade relationships with South and Central America.
Priority areas for St. Kitts and Nevis. I am so happy that you mentioned South and Central America, because you're right. We need to develop closer ties with South and Central America as well. And in many instances, they are closer to us than some of the other countries in the Middle East and even in Africa.
He lamented the absence of direct transportation links between Africa and the Caribbean, as well as between South and Central America and the Caribbean.
It is a matter of great regret that we have no direct transportation links between Africa and the Caribbean, or between South and Central America and the Caribbean. All that we do here, again, is routed through Miami and then comes down to us.
This, the Premier argued, increases cost and makes the region vulnerable to external economic policies. The Premier also raised concerns about President Trump's tariffs on Chinese ships, emphasizing the increase on consumer costs.
President Trump talking about tariffs from some countries, potentially it could increase the cost of goods. So increases our transportation costs could increase the cost of goods. President Trump is now also talking about levying a tariff or fine on Chinese ships. So if your goods just happen to be in a ship that was manufactured in China, I think they're talking about $1 million as a penalty every time that ship calls on a U.S. port.
He explained how this could affect the cost of goods imported from countries like Brazil.
So if a Chinese-made ship is leaving Brazil with beef, going up to Miami, to then bring that beef to the Caribbean, it means that you then have that Chinese ship docking there and that penalty being applied, which means that they're going to pass it on now to us down here, who are the consumers.
Brantley acknowledged President Trump's prerogative to act in America's best interests.
President Trump is making decisions in the best interest as he sees it for America. That's what leaders are supposed to do. I have no argument with him doing what he says he's doing to, as he puts it, make America great again.
However, he cautioned against allowing these policies to impoverish the region.
But in making America great again, the question is whether or not we're going to allow that to impoverish the rest of us.
He called for a proactive approach to forging new relationships, establishing the role of CARICOM in leading this effort.
And so we now need, if sovereignty is to mean anything, it is for us now to use it to do the very things that you are suggesting, Mr. Barr, to engage in new relationships. I believe that the CARICOM, again, is the focal point. St. Kitts Nevis on its own doesn't present much of a market.
The Premier suggested CARICOM should
be mounting missions to Latin America, should be talking to Brazil and Argentina, those countries that are large producers in Latin America, and saying, hey, how can we get...
He also proposed engaging with shipping companies to explore direct routes from Latin America and Central America, bypassing the need to route goods through the United States.
There may well be shipping companies in Latin America that we don't even know, because on here we're accustomed to what I think Burnwood and Tropical, those are the ones that we're accustomed to. But what about the possibility of coming direct across to us? Rather than going north to come back south, just come direct to us. Okay? And let us know talk about trade. Let us talk about people.
Premier Brantley highlighted the progress in facilitating a visa-free travel to Latin America for St. Kitts and Nevis citizens.
One of the things that we achieved, again, I'm very proud of, as foreign minister, is that every single country in Latin America, with the exception of Mexico, St. Kitts and Nevis can go to visa-free. Everyone.
He stressed the need to improve airline connectivity, questioning why airlines like Copa and Avianca do not serve St. Kitts.
Copa, for example, is a leading airline within Panama, Panamanian Airlines. Why can't Copa be flying to St. Kitts? It's not a long flight. Probably 2 hours, same distance if you're going Miami. Right? Why can't we get Avianca, I think it's called, to come here? We need to start with a conversation.
He drew a parallel to revenue guarantees provided to British Airways, American Airlines, and JetBlue, suggesting similar arrangements could be offered to airlines from Nigeria, Ethiopia, or Panama. Acknowledging the importance of linguistic skills for enhanced trade relations, Premier Brantley emphasized that while bilingualism and trilingualism are beneficial, technological advancements provide immediate solutions.
Because if we're going to move in those directions, we need people who are bilingual and trilingual. We need people who speak Spanish. I think Brazil, they speak Portuguese, right? We need people. But in this day and age, it's about, I think that's even secondary. That will come. I don't know that that's a priority because I see people now with their phone having full conversations in foreign languages because the man just talking to his phone in English and the phone says whatever in Portuguese to the person. So there are apps now that will help us.
He urged local businesses to explore opportunities in Latin America, encouraging companies like Rams and Value Mart to
go and find out what kind of food you all have available here. And rather than sending it up north, to send it back to us, send it directly to us.
Brantley stated that President Trump's policies
will provide a catalyst, I think that's the word you use, and will force us to adapt and to do things in a different way. And I welcome that.
He reiterated that the United States remains an important partner, but emphasized the need to diversify trade relationships.
Again, I am never going to suggest we abandon the United States. It's our partner, it's been our partner for years. But putting all of our eggs in that basket just doesn't make sense for us anymore. We need to pivot. We need to adjust. And I see Latin America, Africa, Middle East, Asia. Those are the areas we need to pivot to.
He pointed to the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia's investment in St. Kitts and Nevis geothermal project as an example of the potential benefits of expanding diplomatic ties.
And I think it gave me tremendous satisfaction to see that it is the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, a new diplomatic ally, that came to our aid in terms of geothermal. Not England, not Canada, not the EU, not America, but Saudi Arabia.
He also noted Barbados' decision to open a high commission in Ghana, highlighting the growing recognition of the importance of closer ties with Africa.
So Barbados has seen the value in tighter connections, and so Barbados has now opened a high commission in Ghana.
Brantley advocated for a more substantial OECS presence in Africa, suggesting the establishment of joint embassies in Addis Ababa and South Africa. Ultimately, Premier Brantley's message was a call for political will and foresight, urging St. Kitts and Nevis and its regional partners to pursue trade diversification and strengthen ties with emerging markets proactively.
But as I said, Mr. Bart, it needs a political will, and we need to see the value in it. And it's sad to say that we may be forced to go in that direction, because I don't think it should require force. It should require foresight. It should require thoughtfulness. But I believe that's the direction that we have to head into.
Premier of Nevis, the Honorable Mark Brantley.
The Director of the Department of Agriculture, Nevis, Mr. Randy Elliott, in sharing an outlook for 2024 at Agri-Expo 2025, revealed a resilient agricultural sector. He explained that the sector has been adapting to the triple challenges of climate change, sustainability concerns, and shifting consumer demand.
Within the last year, the Department of Agriculture would have had some challenges. Not just the department, but our farmers alike. And with the inclusion of technology, we have been able to overcome some of those challenges. Last year, our abattoir would have done significantly well. Our livestock farmers would have done significantly well last year, we would have seen an increase of 15% in terms of farmers' payout, reaching almost $800,000 being paid to our livestock farmers here in the island of Nevis. That is no small feat. Our agricultural depot would have paid out close to $400,000 to our farmers in 2024. That shows that food is being produced on the island of Nevis.
The Nevis agricultural sector is expected to continue supplying agri-food products despite a major fall in the number of agri-processors present at the Agri-Expo in 2024. A significantly higher number were present in 2025.
Last year, we would have came to the expo and would have seen a slight decline in terms of the representation of agro-processors on the island. And we would have reached out to them, to new individuals. We would have partnered with the Ministry of Social Development to ensure that we were able to provide training for young agro-processors. If you walk around the grounds, last year, from just having 2, we are up to about 11 individuals here today. That shows that something is happening on the island of Nevis. Some may ask, what is this happening? When you walk through the booths, even the booths of the ministry, the booths of our farmers, you would realize the diversity within the sector. You're seeing seniors, you're seeing youths, you're seeing women, and that shows that we are inclusive in terms of everything that we do within our sector.
At Agri-Expo 2025, a variety of local meats, fruits, vegetables, and agri-processed products were on sale. The Nevis Agriculture Director encouraged the residents to buy local and eat local. He said consumers could expect a positive impact on their wallets and improvement in the food import bill once they support the local farmers, fishers, and agri-processors.
When you look around, when you go to the agro-processing booth, you're going to see breadfruit flour. You're going to see tacos made from local produce. When you go to the farmers, you're going to see green bananas. You're going to see breadfruit. You're going to see cassava. I'm asking our people to eat local. Eat local. It's very difficult at times when we speak of a food importation belt. But when you go to Gingerland, you're seeing breadfruit on the ground. When you go to Barnsgate, you're seeing breadfruit on the ground. Our people need to start to consume local.
St. Kitts and Nevis is poised to become a central trade hub between the Caribbean and West Africa after signing a Memorandum of Understanding (MOU) with the Nigeria-based Green Economic Zone (GEZ) Special Economic Zone Management Company. Prime Minister of St. Kitts and Nevis, the Honorable Dr. Terence Drew, emphasized the significance of this agreement during the roundtable broadcast on April 2nd, 2025, stating that it paves the way for developing a state-of-the-art agro-hub, warehouse, and logistics center in St. Kitts and Nevis. The ambitious project aims to establish the African Caribbean Atlantic Cooperation (ACAC), a landmark initiative designed to facilitate the direct movement of goods between the west coast of Africa and the Caribbean. Dr. Drew said this undertaking will enhance trade by exporting agricultural products from St. Kitts and Nevis. Further solidifying this partnership, a special Nigerian team will attend the upcoming Investment Gateway Summit in May 2025 in St. Kitts and Nevis. This summit will serve as a platform to continue the development of this initiative. The Prime Minister envisions St. Kitts and Nevis as a central point of trade, explaining,
"The hub is going to be built on St. Kitts and Nevis, and is to receive, for example, goods and services, goods really from Western Africa that will come into this hub. And then from this hub, we can distribute throughout the Caribbean."
He further elaborated on the two-way nature of this trade relationship, noting,
"And then what we wanted is to collect from St. Kitts and Nevis and the Caribbean in terms of goods to go back to West Africa, so that that hub is a logistics, so it arranges, of course, the logistics of movement, and it's a hub where you can have receive and send."
Minister of Agriculture, Fisheries, Marine Resources and Cooperatives, Small Business and Entrepreneurship, Sports and the Creative Economy, the Honorable Samuel Duggins, echoed the Prime Minister's enthusiasm, emphasizing the historical context of this alliance. Duggins stated that the MOU
really embodies trade between both regions. What we endeavor to do through this MOU is connect or reconnect what has been a historical route of trade.
Referencing the Great Triangle trade route, Minister Duggins explained,
"We are now reimagining that, and we have dubbed it the Transatlantic Bridge. coming off of the idea of the transatlantic trade. And that transatlantic bridge will facilitate trade with the continent of Africa into the Western Hemisphere. St. Kitts being at the center of that trade, as the hub of that trade in the Western Hemisphere.
Recognizing the challenges of freight costs, Minister Duggins highlighted the strategy of establishing direct trade routes.
What we are doing is connecting direct trade routes from Africa to St. Kitts direct to Africa. And not just via sea, which is one of the main areas that we are looking at, but we are looking at air freight as well.
He also pointed to the unique status of the economic zone in Nigeria.
The economic zone, it's almost like a sovereign within Nigeria. And so they are governed by their own tax and trade laws. And we are now able to conduct business with them and them with us.
Prime Minister Drew emphasized the potential market size in Africa, which has over 1 billion people.
If the Caribbean were to just get 1% of that market, we'll be able to sell everything that we have.
He also highlighted the strategic advantage of the established transatlantic route, noting,
So I already calculated that to move things from West Africa to the Caribbean is about 15 days to get across. The Atlantic, that route is well known.
Minister Duggins underscored the timelines of this initiative, particularly in light of recent trade developments.
Most of us woke up to news just this morning about tariffs being placed on the region through America. The sad part is we have a huge trade deficit with America, where most of what we import comes through America. And now we are seeing we are being punished for even that. This is the right time for One Africa. This is the right time to reconnect with who we are and where we are from. And I think this is a historic moment.
Concluded Minister of Agriculture, Fisheries, Marine Resources and Cooperatives, Small Business and Entrepreneurship, Sports and the Creative Economy, the Honorable Samuel Duggins. The United States Department of State addressed concerns surrounding a proposed draft list outlining new visa restrictions for 43 countries, including 6 from the Caribbean. During a department press briefing on March 17, 2025, spokesperson Tammy Bruce denounced the existence of an alleged draft list published on several news sites stating that some 43 countries would face new visa restrictions. The alleged list identified St. Kitts and Nevis, Dominica, St. Lucia, Haiti, Venezuela, and Cuba as Caribbean nations potentially affected by the restrictions. According to the reports, the list was divided into 3 categories: red, orange, and yellow. The red list allegedly barred 11 countries entry to the U.S. outright, including Cuba and Venezuela. Haiti was reportedly on the orange list and required an in-person interview to be granted a U.S. entry visa. The yellow list included some 20-odd countries that had 60 days to rectify certain issues in relation to entry in the U.S., which included OECS countries with citizenship by investment programs. While Bruce denounced the list as actionable, she did say that visa allowances into the U.S. are being reviewed and how that may affect the country's safety as the Trump administration continues to clamp down on immigration issues. On April 2nd, 2025, during the roundtable broadcast, St. Kitts and Nevis Prime Minister, the Honorable Dr. Terence Drew, provided an update on the situation.
Let me first say that when that came out, I did not know it was out. I received a message from the highest representation at the U.S. Embassy in Barbados because a new ambassador has not been appointed since the last ambassador left the position after the change of administration in the United States of America, Ambassador Roger, who was a hard worker there. And I received that message, and she said to me, PM, we know that this is in the media. Let me state that we have no knowledge of this, and Washington has not communicated anything to us. So we inquired at all levels, and everybody said there's nothing that they have seen of such.
Despite the State Department's denial, Dr. Drew acknowledged the constant reviews the U.S. engages in regarding access to their country.
As a matter of fact, a representative from the State Department was asked subsequently in a press conference, and she said, I can't even speak to it because there's no list. But is Washington constantly reviewing things? Yes. And so we saw that, we inquired about it. Of course, it was discussed at the level of OECS, and OECS is going to engage the United States of America. I spoke to the Director General this morning about our plan to engage the United States of America. And the head of CARICOM now, Chair, Prime Minister Motley, in her official report after the meeting, she said that she brought it up with the United States and discussions are ongoing as to when OECS would meet with the United States. But one of the proposed time is during the spring meeting, which is to take place at the further, I think it's the 3rd to 4th week of this present month in April. And so that had been sought.
Dr. Drew emphasized the ongoing positive relationship between St. Kitts and Nevis and the United States.
And so they have said there's no list, there's nothing really there that we can discuss on that particular matter. So our strategy is that all the countries come together. We have decided that we should go and engage and see, what they, but this engagement is an ongoing engagement. United States of America is one of our closest allies, has always been. And so we want to have continuous dialogue and discussion with the United States of America. We may not agree on everything because we can't. They have their own interests and we have our own interests as well. However, we have had a tremendously good relationship and we want to continue that excellent relationship that we have had with the United States of America. So she has said to me, there's no list. However, we are seeking to have that dialogue going forward.
In regional news, Guyana's government studying 38% U.S. tariffs on Guyanese products, Guyana News source reports.
Blindsided by the 38% tariffs that the U.S. has imposed on products from Guyana, the government of Guyana is engaging U.S. officials on the tariffs in an effort to better understand the reason behind them and seek a way forward. At his weekly press conference, Vice President Bharat Jagdeo said the government will be approaching the U.S. government to clarify some issues, which he believes could see the tariffs for Guyana being reduced. Mr. Jagdeo said while Guyana respects the economic policy of the U.S., he believes that there is some information that needs to be clarified. The U.S. has claimed that Guyana imposes tariffs of 76% on imports from America, triggering the 38% reciprocal tariffs on Guyana, which represents half of the tariffs being faced by U.S. products. Vice President Jagdeo said he has been studying the trade data between Guyana and the U.S., and that data points to Guyana importing far more from the U.S. than it exports to the U.S. He said the U.S. benefits from a trade surplus when it comes to Guyana.
So when you apply this, so every country, the bigger your trade surplus is for the United States of America, the bigger the surplus is in percentage term, the higher would be your reciprocal tariff because they take using this formula. So that is why and it's across the board. It is for friend and foe alike. The United States has applied this right across the board on the basis of this formula that we think that they applied.
Mr. Jagdeo also said the import data from the country will form part of the discussions with the U.S. government. He told reporters that the information that is available on the UN trade system and the information in the possession of the government of Guyana are conflicting, and he believes once there is clarity, the tariffs could be reduced.
So I think there's still room to discuss a lot of these issues with the United States of America to show maybe to clarify if there is any difference in data on which the calculations were made, which hopefully can result in a lower tariff because the United States have already made it clear every country in the world would have to pay, tariffs.
He also said the question is not whether Guyana agrees or disagrees with the tariffs, but it is to maintain the U.S. market for exporters. According to the Vice President, the U.S. remains a crucial market for Guyanese products. He urged exporters not to panic, while promising that the government will work together with them to address their concerns.
I want to assure all of our exporters that we'll work with them where, as we learn more of the issue, we will be meeting with them, working with them to ensure that they can continue to access the U.S. markets and other markets in the world, and they would have the full support of the government of Guyana so that we do not lose economic output welfare associated with the loss of economic output.
The increase in the tariffs would result in products being imported to the U.S. fetching a higher price on the U.S. market. Exporters and manufacturers fear that with increased prices, the demand for their products could fall, resulting in less earnings and profits. The Donald Trump administration in the U.S. has described this increased tariff policy as an effort to make America rich again.
Grenada efforts in mitigating against tariffs' impacts. Grenada Broadcasting Network has the details.
President Trump's 10% tariff on all countries could have both positive and negative effects on Grenada's agriculture sector. The U.S. is one of Grenada's largest importers of soursop, and with the tariff introduced, it could mean a reduction in demand for those products, potentially hurting Grenada's exports. However, on the positive, Grenada could explore alternative markets to mitigate this impact. GBN was in conversation with Permanent Secretary Isaac Bagwan on the possible impacts on the agriculture sector and how they are preparing to cushion the blow. Bagwan indicated that they are putting a number of measures in place, one of those being a forum that will take place in the coming week involving the private sector. Grenada being a large importer of poultry, the PS explained their plans.
Focusing on the likely impact of the tariff that would be imposed by the U.S. government and how that would affect in terms of the import. As Prime Minister would have indicated, 90% of everything we import, including food. And as such, we have been mandated to ramp up and refocus our budget that have just been approved towards the issue of food security and production. So, in fact, we are looking at areas that we could collaborate with the private sector on. Certainly the area of poultry is a key area. We already have a policy. We have a consultant right now on ground that would be submitting a report within 2 weeks' time so that we could ramp up the support in terms of providing chickens and feed and or whatever additional importance support so that the farmers themselves could ramp up the production of poultry. We are also working with the large, we have two large poultry producers, and they have the capacity of 75,000 and 50,000 each. So again, we're looking at how we could support them in terms of feed, in terms of input of hatching eggs and other sort of inputs so that they too also could ramp up production as it relates to poultry.
As it relates to crop production, the PS said that they will take a little longer to roll out. The forum, he said, will help his ministry to better understand what additional support is needed.
We see as an immediate focus the issue of vegetable production. So we would have received some seedlings, quite a large quantity of seedlings from AICA. We have asked our propagation units, including CADI, to assist us. So some farmers we would give seeds, others we would actually propagate the plants and give them the plants so that they could plant. So that is as an immediate step, and we want persons to take this thing seriously because we're not sure how these policies would impact us, but we have to be prepared and put mitigation measures in place. With the incoming of the tissue culture lab, within 1 month period, we could be able to be up and running to be able to start producing and multiplying plants as quick as possible so that the farmers could plant.
The Permanent Secretary added that although the budget allocation has been approved, they have been mandated to refocus the budget. Since this is an emerging crisis, the ministry officials said they are also considering providing backyard gardeners with additional support apart from seeds and other planting materials. Christina John, GBN News.
We now bring you these international reports.
Several African countries have been hit by some of the highest tariffs announced by US President Donald Trump, including South Africa, which is the continent's biggest exporter to the United States. While some mining products have been exempt, South Africa's agricultural sector is likely to feel the impact. We're in the Free State province, which is home to hundreds of farms that grow various things from maize to nuts. Last year, South Africa exported more than $330 million worth of nuts, fruit and vegetables to the US, and this, of course, creates jobs. The government says the tariffs mean it will look for new trade partners.
Partnerships for mutual benefit are certainly under threat from unilateral tariff measures. Therefore, South Africa will not be left wanting in this trade tussle. We are actively working towards new opportunities and new markets for our goods and services and working with partners to see the value of mutually beneficial partnerships.
The presidency says the newly imposed tariffs are a barrier to trade and it's open to talking with US authorities. But given the latest developments, it's likely South Africa will also lose the preferential trade status it currently enjoys with the US. Famida Miller, Al Jazeera, Free State Province, South Africa.
Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell said Friday the tariffs imposed by U.S. President Donald Trump could lead to higher inflation and slower growth. That would create a potentially difficult set of decisions ahead for the central bank.
We face a highly uncertain outlook with elevated risks of both higher unemployment and higher inflation.
This result would undermine both of the Fed's mandates of 2% inflation and maximum employment, Powell said at a business journalists conference in Arlington, Virginia. Powell spoke as global markets continued a swoon that has wiped some 10% off major U.S. stock indexes since Trump announced a raft of new tariffs on Wednesday. Trump, in a social media post, called on the Fed chief to cut interest rates, saying it was the perfect time to do so. Powell said they need more data before making any decisions.
We're well positioned to wait for greater clarity before considering any adjustments to our policy stance. It is too soon to say what will be the appropriate path for monetary policy.
Investors in contracts tied to the central bank's policy rate appear to be expecting the risks to slower growth will dominate. Markets now expect 4 quarter percentage point rate cuts from the Fed this year, versus 3 before Trump's announcement of tariffs that could tax imports an average of as much as 27% by some estimates, versus about 2.5% at the end of the Biden administration.
Myanmar's military is limiting critically needed humanitarian aid for earthquake victims in areas where it sees opposition to its rule, the United Nations Human Rights Office said on Friday. That's as the death toll from last Friday's 7.7 magnitude earthquake climbed over 3,100, with more than 4,500 injured and more than 200 still missing, according to the junta. In the hard-hit city of Mandalay, volunteer aid worker Zaw Wing condemned the current response.
The rescue operation has been chaotic as the earthquake hit all over the city. The dead bodies are still not being pulled out yet at some damaged sites. The obstacle is that we don't have sufficient support for rescues.
The humanitarian situation in hard-hit areas, especially those out of the military's control, was catastrophic, a UN Rights Office spokesperson said. James Roadhaver from the OHCHR's Myanmar team said the need for aid was particularly urgent in the Zargain region.
This is something that we've been extremely concerned about for a very long time, because this is part of a strategy that is used by the military to prevent aid getting to populations that it views as not supporting its seizure of power back in 2021. And so there has been a very active effort, not just to restrict where humanitarians can go, but particularly to prevent them from delivering aid in conflict-affected areas.
The government on state-run TV announced on Wednesday a 20-day unilateral ceasefire to support post-quake rehabilitation, but warned it would respond accordingly if rebels launched attacks. The UN said it was investigating 53 reported attacks by the junta against its opponents since the earthquake on March 28, including airstrikes, of which 16 came after the ceasefire announcement. On Friday, the office said a further 8 attacks were being investigated. A spokesperson for Myanmar's ruling junta did not respond to calls from Reuters seeking comment. Millions of people have been affected by Myanmar's widening civil war, triggered by the coup that ousted the elected government in 2021.
You were listening to the WINN FM 98.9 newscast. Our top stories were:
Nevis Premier advocates for trade diversification amidst Trump-era tariffs. St. Kitts Nevis ministers address historic trade alliance with Nigeria. St. Kitts Nevis Prime Minister addresses U.S. visa restriction concerns. Guyana's government studying 38% U.S. tariffs on Guyanese products. Grenada efforts in mitigating against tariffs impacts. Internationally, South Africa's farmers hit hard by U.S. tariffs under Trump.
Thank you for listening.